Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Real Science Exchange, the pubcast where leading scientists and industry professionals meet over a few drinks to discuss the latest ideas and trends in animal nutrition. We've got a real nice topic tonight for us. Sabine and Mann gave a presentation today titled Mining Liquid Gold, Strategies to Supercharge Colostrum Production. So I'm assuming we're going to talk about what can we do to increase colostrum production. So first of all, Sabine, I'd like to ask you just kind of introduce yourself and give us an overview of who you are and some of the research that you do.
Yeah, sure, Scott. Thank you for the introduction. As you mentioned, I was presenting on colostrum, the topic of colostrum today. The interest in this topic comes from my clinical work. I'm a veterinarian. I work for Cornell University. I spend about half my time going to farms in the area around Ithaca. And we had these questions come in from producers that mentioned that they don't have enough colostrum all year round. And so I also run a research program, and I thought it was intriguing that we've talked about colostrum forever, longer than all of us together probably have been alive, and we still have these issues. So as part of my research program, I picked this up and we did some studies to try to figure out what could potential reasons be for low colostrum production. And from that, a few more spin-off studies just in the general area of colostrum management and the role it plays for the calf, how we can preserve it on farm, and so, etc.
Where are you from? And kind of with that, since this is a pub theme, what's in your glass tonight and why?
Yeah, I can't hide that accent. In my glass today is a pigeon head Kölsch, and so that gives you a clue of where I might be from. And if you know Kölsch, you know it's mostly water, so I'm not actually drinking beer, I'm drinking an electrolyte solution tonight.
But it is a German beer?
It is a German beer.
Okay,
yeah.
all right, very well. And I understand German beers have 3 ingredients, right? Water, which is number 1, good water, yeast, and barley.
Yep,
all
that's
right.
right.
Very
we
well.
have a whole law about how to make beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And so I think that's a good thing. None of those nasty preservatives. Yeah. So thank you for joining us. Got a star-studded panel with us tonight. Down on this end, I got Dr. Will Mustas. Mustas. Yeah, there we go. That's better. Will, tell us a little bit about yourself and what's in your glass tonight.
So I'm from Wisconsin, southeastern Wisconsin originally. Graduated from University of Wisconsin, Madison for undergrad, and continued to Madison for veterinary school. Graduated in 2016 and moved to Central Valley of California. Been in clinical practice for about 8 years now, and I'm now working, transitioning onto the dairy management, nutrition and management consulting side with Progressive Dairy Solutions.
Excellent. Consider yourself a native Californian yet?
I still have not gotten used to the heat.
Not there yet?
It was nice seeing snow on the drive over here.
Yeah. All right. Good. And to my right here is Dr. Don Niles. Don, thank you for joining us. You and I met several years ago. I know you don't remember it. I remember it well, but you're a classy guy. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks for inviting me for one thing. I appreciate being here with the group. I'm going to listen more than talk, I think, which is not characteristic for me. But I come from Wisconsin also, and I was raised in a non-farm community. I remember going out with a veterinarian when I was in high school because I was interested in being a veterinarian, riding with one and asking him what kind of cows the black and white ones were because I didn't know.
Is that right?
So starting from a suburban kid, and went through veterinary school in University of Minnesota. We hadn't had a school in Wisconsin yet at that point. Graduated in '82 and practiced in Casco, Wisconsin, northeast Wisconsin, for several years. Had an opportunity in '98 to go to California and work with Monsanto and the large herds out there, and that was a phenomenal opportunity because I'd heard about them and understood they were really big herds out there, but it really didn't know anything about managing herds of that size. Enjoyed that very much for 3 years. And then my best client and best friend from practice called up and said it was time for me to stop clowning around in California and come back to Wisconsin and build a dairy together.
Oh, nice.
So that's what we did with Dairy Dreams, also in Kewaunee County. And John is no longer with us after having an accident, but his family and I are partners there and they're doing a phenomenal job of representing the dairy industry and
Yes, they are.
taking care of cows. Our whole focus for us has got to be convincing the public or reassuring the public that the care our cows get is top notch and would be the kind of care we want our own children to get.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Looking forward to the conversation. Our color commentator tonight is going to be Joey Airosa from Tulare County, California. Now, Joey, this is not your first time to the pub. You've joined us one other time back, it's been a couple years, but had the opportunity last night to have dinner with you, share a few stories, and for those listening, he's a great ambassador for the dairy industry, and so I appreciate you and appreciate you joining us tonight. With that, why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself and what's in your your bottle tonight?
Well, somebody mentioned the heat in California, and after a hard day's work in the summer, I got to where I like these Michelob Ultras. They're easy drinking, probably just a step away from water, really, but they go down
Step away from
good.
Coach.
Yeah, they go down good when it's about 115.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I drink, and I like wine too. My wife and I enjoy a good glass of wine now and then, and it puts us both in a better mood sometimes.
You got some nice wines out there, Joey.
Yeah. A little bit about our family. My great-grandfather came to California in 1912 and settled just about where we're at, actually. And my grandfather came with him. He was 12 years old. And my grandfather started a dairy in 1938. He bought his own little farm. They had been milking about 10 cows apiece by hand for about 30 years. And I think my grandfather was the only one that was really interested in staying in the business, and he bought a little farm, which we still own today, and he started his own dairy. And then, unfortunately, he died at a young age he died in 1963. So my dad took over when he was 25 years old, took over the farm, and he grew the farm and really gave me the opportunity to be in the business. The dairy farm, and generally, it's a clear across the country, it's a family-owned business mostly, and takes really generations of people who have been dedicated to it to kind of keep it going. We probably the value-added side of our business is when I started 4-H in 1969. We had bought some registered Holsteins in 1967, and we started kind of growing the herd with registered Holstein. And so for 50, 60 plus years, we've been kind of working with genetics and trying to make our cows better. And I think we, to my dad's credit, and really my grandfather too, I think he started using registered bulls in the 40s. We were lucky. We had some really great herds in our neighborhood, Sutton Oaks and Rocky Hill, and Cal Clark was just down the road. So we kind of had the blessing of having some great genetics that we could implement into our herd early on. And I think my dad, I give him a lot of credit. In the early 80s, he wanted to really emphasize protein in our herd. And this was kind of before the cheese thing really took off. And so we started kind of looking at protein and type and good cows that could enable us to be competitive and keep our family farm going. Because I think one of the things that in our neighborhood, especially Tulare County, the number one dairy county in the United States, is that people figured out early on that it takes good cows to survive in this business. It's really competitive, and so I think it's important. You got to have good cows and you got to take care of them. And I always say the showing part of the equation is what kind of helps us take better care of our cows at home, because our employees see the extra care we give to some of the cows, and I think that really spreads into the rest of the herd. And the other thing that we noticed was that if you take really good care of your cows at home, they give a lot more milk on a lot less, because the environment really can take a lot away from them if you're not paying attention to that. And so that's really where their profit center's at. The other thing that I think is a big deal, and this kind of goes with the calves, is that I think when you work with your animals the way we do with the showing and helping kids show heifers and things like that, it really helps your cow care and the people. We have really good employees on our farm, and I think it really, really spreads to the calf care, where you have people that really want to take the time to take care of calves. Because calves, in our opinion, and I think most really good dairy farmers have figured out that the day that calf's born, that is the beginning of your profitability for the next 5 or 6 years or however long you can keep her. And so the better you can take care of her, the chances are your herd's going to just be that much more, profitable. So
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into the conversation. Sabine, to kind of ease into that conversation, so mining the liquid gold, that's provocative. So give us kind of the high points of the presentation and how do we mine that liquid gold?
New research is changing everything we thought we knew about choline's impact on the cow and her calf, and top scientists have a lot to say about it. They are presenting new research that supports choline as a required nutrient to optimize milk production, choline as a required nutrient to support a healthy transition, choline as a required nutrient to improve calf health and growth, and choline as a required nutrient to increase colostrum quantity. This new research is solidifying choline's role as a required nutrient for essentially every cow, regardless of health status, milk production level, or body condition score. Learn more about the science that is changing the game and the choline source that is making it happen. Reassure precision-release choline from Balchem. Visit balchem.com/scientistsay to learn more.
Yeah, it is indeed a really good segue because that day that the calf is born, you have a very important job to make sure that that calf gets equipped with the best chances to grow well, stay healthy, not leave the herd prematurely, and giving good quality and an adequate quantity of colostrum quickly after birth it is the key component in assuring that. And we talked a little bit earlier on how you manage colostrum in your herd and how important you think it is. And we consider it the liquid gold, not just because it's yellow-ish, but because it has such an integral function in making sure that that calf will be healthy in those first few weeks of life when it has the highest chances of getting sick. And the key component in that, and we've known about that for a long time, is immunoglobulins, antibodies. But we're extending our understanding of why it is so important and why it is so valuable, like gold, because there's other components in colostrum. And maybe when we're managing for high IgG transfer, we're also, by proxy, managing for the transfer of all of these other components, or at least the supply to the calf of these other components. And those can be nutrients that are important that we shouldn't forget about to deliver some energy to the calf, but then also other bioactive components in colostrum, such as growth factors that make the gut mature better, that make this fluid that is not just a solution of IgG and water so valuable.
Yeah, interesting. So I kind of like to swing over this side of the table and kind of get maybe Don, start with you. What is your perspective of colostrum? How do you treat it at the dairy? How do you guys value it, manage it, etc.? It's kind of an open-ended question, but
it's a good open-handed question, and it's changed dramatically over the years as technology has come along for us to process the colostrum. Since we built Dairy Dreams, we've had a large enough herd that we could afford full-time maternity staff. And I think that's a critical aspect of what we want to do as dairy producers, is have specialists working in maternity who are dedicated to that job. And I think the other thing we've got to keep in mind is in places like Wisconsin, we have an entire state that was used to 30 cow dairy farms, and the tendency was to be very suspicious of the 1,000 cow dairies being built now, as they thought of them as factory farms and not good places for cows to be. And having been a veterinarian in large herds and small herds, I realized that there is no correlation between size and management attention. You're either focused on that or you're not. So we've taken a great focus on maternity We have, as I mentioned, the dedicated staff. As we grow larger, we've got 2 people on each shift instead of 1. And their entire job is devoted to maternity work, colostrum handling, processing those fresh calves, and trying to do it in a way that that's acceptable to the non-farm public. We have a lot of tours come through. We one time actually had we were out for dinner, and there were 4 of us with our wives, dairy farmers, talking about dairy stuff. And there was a couple at the next table, and I could see they were listening, but they didn't make too much of it. And finally, one of them leaned over and said, "Are you dairy farmers?" And we said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I'm a nurse," she said, "and I've been listening to you, but I'm wondering how you can take care of all those animals properly." And that was a wonderful challenge. And we started talking about maternity. And as a nurse, she did a lot of maternity work herself, so she was interested in that. It turns out that she told her husband the only thing she wanted for her birthday was to go and see a calf be born. And these are people that had never been on a farm before, and they're educated people, but that whole act of how does that new life come into the world, and how is it handled by us and cared for by us, that was very important to her. And I said, "Well, anytime you like, give me a call and you can come out and come to maternity. Somebody's going to be calving every couple hours." So they came out, and of course it was 30 below that day in Wisconsin, and they were watching for about 3 hours. And of course all the animals in maternity were just looking at her like, "Why are you here? Nothing's going on today." So she and her husband went off to get lunch, and they came back afterwards just as a cow was calving. And it was one of those calvings where the cow is smiling and the baby calf is born smiling. Everything just went beautifully. And she wrote a thank you letter later that that's one of the best days of her life, is getting to see a calf be born on a dairy farm. And that just helped me focus on the idea that people really do care. We can sometimes be focused on protocol and not on the reasons for the protocol. And I think we just have to continue to stimulate that and realize that this is our future that's being born, and it's our responsibility to give it all the care possible. So we focused on that as we think as part of the fee that we have to pay, and being a large farm and still being welcome in the Wisconsin community. So it's a big focus of ours.
Yeah, very, very interesting comments. Great story. He's talking about protocol, and I think we were talking about that a little bit last night, and, having the right people that can carry out that protocol. And I loved what you said about, having kind of the objective in mind. It's not just about the protocol, it's about the outcome. And maybe I'm paraphrasing, but
You said it better than I did.
well, but it kind of correlates with some of the things that we were discussing last evening. So maybe that's a great segue to you, Joe. And we'll get to you, Sabine.
That's okay. I have a full glass of juice.
And there's more where that came from. Joey, why don't you share with us? I know last night you told us that you put a high priority on colostrum, again, because, those calves are your future. Would you mind just kind of talking a little bit about that?
So, I'll back up a little bit. We built a new farm in 2006, and we kind of, I'm kind of a nibbler. So we built the milking portion of it, which was basically a $10 million deal. And we turned my grandfather's facility, my dad's facility, into a place where we would milk some cows, but also calve there. And that kind of satisfied us for a little bit. And thank God we probably did it, because then 08, 09 came, and it actually probably was a blessing that we didn't have quite a bit more debt. And so then in 2016, we built a new maternity facility, calving area. We have a separate calving area for cows by lactation. So older cows are come into the close-up pen and they stay in a certain area. And then the first the heifers calving have a separate pen. And then we call it like our calf maternity area, calf kitchen, where we put in pasteurizer. And we were already pasteurizing at our home farm, but we kind of upgraded that, and we really, put the freezers in and got everything set up where we can really try to do it right, and went round the clock maternity. And I think that the calf thing, raising your own calves, whether you raise them or not, but it's the most important thing you can do. It's the beginning of success, really, on your farm. And so trying to make sure that we get the protocols right, dipping the navel, feeding. We try to feed within 30 minutes. That's our goal. I always say, in a perfect world, if we could have 10 calves every day, that'd be awesome. But you know how it goes. We get 3 and then we get 23, and so it changes. And that's as dairy farmers, we deal with a lot of things like that, the unpredictables, whether it's weather or, weather causes different calving cycles. The other thing that we, in the last couple of years, we've tried hard to work on is, it's kind of like a track race where you hand the baton off to somebody, and making sure our employees are communicating with each other about when one comes and one goes. There's a little bit of overlap, and making sure that they know if a calf didn't drink all its bottle. We were talking about that earlier. Or, making sure that we have a protocol sheet that they write down what time they feed the calf. And that's really, it's gotten buy-in to them. One of the things that my calf people have figured out is that if you do everything right, it's a lot easier and it's fun. And if you don't do everything right that first day, you kind of have hell to pay, So just trying to instill that mindset into them. And I ran a 40 cow dairy, and I run a 3,000 cow dairy. And to be honest, I have a lot of respect for people who run 40 cow dairies, because they're just as demanding, and it's because you don't have the ability to have the extra people to have the overlap and things like that. And so, I always have a lot of respect for, I don't care what size dairy you have, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. So, Joey, you mentioned that you try to get the colostrum in them within 30 minutes. And one of the things I learned today, Sabine, from your presentation, is that that's probably pretty good objective, right? Yeah. So, but your presentation was very scientific. Why don't you kind of talk through some of the science that you've done and where you think that sweet spot is?
Yeah, I'm a science geek.
Yeah.
That's usually what happens. Talking about the timing that colostrum goes into the calf is critical. We've known a lot of things about colostrum for a very long time. And I think protocols have been in place for a very long time. Just want to back up a little bit from what both of you said. People need to understand why it's important to follow these protocols. And whenever everything else happens on the dairy, it still has to be a priority number one on that day one to care for the calf, right? We look at many different factors. We have looked at how much colostrum to give calves. That's one of the latest things that we have done. And that was a consequence of folks asking us, well, should we feed every calf 4 liters? Where I work, it's quite common that everybody gets fed 4 liters or a gallon, 3.8 liters. But calf sizes are different between herds, and you probably noticed that your calf sizes even change a little bit by year. And there are some concerns that maybe, although we want these calves to drink colostrum very quickly after they're born, within 30 minutes, within an hour, we also may want to make sure that we don't overfill them with colostrum. And that also gives us the ability to have potentially extra colostrum to store and use for another calf, right? So we looked at that, and I think you feed 3 liters first feeding.
We feed 3 liters, and it was because, like we discussed earlier, we bottle feed everything. And so we tried 4, but that last little bit was just like, it took a long time. And so we kind of settled in on 3 liters for 3 quarts for Holstein calves, 2 quarts for Jersey calves.
Mm-hmm. And there's actually research, research out there that suggests that calves will not voluntarily drink much more than 3.5 liters on average. And there's probably a reason for that, because we have only a certain capacity of the stomach to hold colostrum. And when we feed them not by bottle, but maybe with an esophageal feeder or feeder in general, then we might actually be overfilling them a little bit. That slows down some of their emptying of the stomach. and that's very scientifically now, but that will slow down how colostrum gets into the intestine and how the good stuff out of that gold is actually taken up into circulation. So we think that we have to get a little bit more refined on how much we offer these calves in the first feeding, and maybe preserve that leftover colostrum and give them a second feeding when their stomach has had a chance to empty out. So that is one of the areas of research that we're really interested in. And it does turn out if you don't give them too much, they actually are able to extract more of the immunoglobulins from that colostrum. So we've been able to show that. And I don't know how much you're feeding in your herd and how you strategize.
We feed 4 liters, but I'm afraid to say that now.
And I'm not saying 4 liters is bad. A lot of calves are good, decent size, and 4 liters is probably the appropriate amount. What I'm saying is that we probably need better understanding of the choices we make for how much we feed. And the 4 liters really came out of the consideration for good quality colostrum probably having 50 grams per liter of IgG, and we wanted to, at the time, get 200 grams into the calf. And so the easy math was 200 grams equals 4 liters. And conveniently, most calves do pretty well with that. But I think each producer has a chance to make decisions on how much they want to feed and if they want to feed once or twice. And I think I would just invite the thought to challenge the idea of everybody gets 4 liters and maybe that's the best. And even maybe making a sheet or something that says, these calves at this weight might want to, have the 4 liters, but then when they're smaller, maybe we can feed less and so on. And I think your observation that most calves won't drink much more than 3 liters is something that is often shared with us.
Our conversation today was about, because we bottle feed, if I could figure out how to make my colostrum super high quality and stronger, maybe 2 liters would be enough. I asked you that question.
Exactly, yeah. The 4 liter suggestion is because 50 grams per liter of IgG is actually not really good quality colostrum. From all the science we've done, most herds have an average of about 90 to 100 grams per liter of IgG in colostrum. So I think on every farm, there's an opportunity to find out how good is your colostrum and actually make your own guidelines of where you're going to cut that quality, and then based on that, maybe you can optimize your feeding amounts. And we have, not perfect, but we have the ability to do Brix values that let us estimate colostrum quality. And if you can prioritize that really high quality colostrum when you're bottle feeding, I think you're going to be able to get the good stuff into them in a smaller volume, which will benefit you when you're relying on them to drink it voluntarily.
One thing we notice is if you're walking your pens, and you see, there's 2 things. If you see a calf that's super strong, there'll always be another calf next to her. They'll be right together, really strong calves. And if you ever find a weaker calf, there'll usually be a couple of them, seems like. And it's because we pool our colostrum, and I feel like, it's the batch that was either crazy good or wasn't quite so good, And so that, to me, that's a sign that if we could figure out the super calves, what they got, and if we could maintain that across every calf that's born, then calf raising would get pretty easy.
You'd be golden, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how do we do that, Sabine?
Right. So that's $1 million question, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love the one graph that you showed today where you had, I think there was 4 different levels, and you had the 2 middle ones were very close together, but that high level quality of colostrum really separated itself from the low level and the other 2 treatments. I guess treatment's not the right word, but yeah.
You mean for the calf
Yeah,
morbidity, mortality?
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there's actually data to suggest that what you're observing is science based as well. Sorry to come back to the science, but yeah, we do know.
Yeah, I didn't even need the science.
I know. Right? This is usually what happens. I'll trail behind what is already being observed, and then I supply some data. But there's good data to suggest that if we have this really good colostrum and you have that batch where you see the calves doing really well, that equates to them having excellent levels of IgG. And I will stress this one more time. We measure IgG, but we're probably approximating other things that are in that colostrum as well. And they do much better as far as not getting sick and having a much, much lower risk of dying. We used to just think, oh, we have to get, over a certain threshold in the calves, and once they're over that, we're fine. The more data we have, and this came out of the NAM study, 2014 data driven by Dr. Lombard, we now understand that once you make it over that threshold, if you can climb a little higher in that IgG concentration, the calves do better. And that's the graph that you were referring to, where those calves that have a much higher transfer of passive immunity or IgG concentration in their blood just have a much lower risk of getting sick or even potentially dying, which is something that we don't want on the farm. There's many factors that go into how a cow makes colostrum and how we get it out of her and then how we feed it. One simple one maybe that we can start with is we've always worried a little bit about, we know we have to feed the calf really quickly after birth, and you feed within an hour or two, and you feed within
About
or even
15 minutes.
15 minutes, yeah. Oh, he's beating you with 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I have to catch up on that. But the worry has always been, what if I can't milk the cow that quickly, right? And on many farms, cows get milked, and maybe that particular cow's colostrum isn't getting fed to that particular calf. So we've looked at, is the quality of colostrum decreasing if I wait hours after the cow calves? I've already fed the calf, that's very important, but if I wait to milk that cow to harvest her colostrum, will something happen to the quality if I wait too long? And yes, there will be something happening to the quality if you wait too long. You have some hours, and that's reassuring.
That's, you said 8 hours, right?
Yeah, about 8 hours, where you really see this dilution effect coming in, where the quantity will start increasing, but we won't have that 90, 100, or even more grams per liter anymore, because we're starting to decrease, because there will be that dilution effect. So that's one thing, to make sure that you harvest the colostrum in a timely manner. That will assure that you preserve that quality that the cow made in the first place. Another factor that we can look at is how we feed the cow during the dry period. And so we've known for a long time that if cows are under nutrition, lack protein, lack energy, that we don't seem to get good quality colostrum. We understand now that probably having sufficient protein and then adding more won't make a difference, but we want to make sure that dry cows are not deficient in protein supply. So that's going to be really important. IgG, our immunoglobulins, is a protein, right? Somebody has to make the protein, and if cows are deficient in amino acids or in protein in general, they will likely not make as many immunoglobulins, and they have to be taken up from the bloodstream. So we have to make sure that gets assured as well. Older cows, I shared that today. We always want to have the older cows colostrum because we think that's much better quality, and that's true, but it doesn't start until cows get into lactation 3, 4, 5, and plus. And we have a lot of cows on our farms that are first and second lactation, and they have a bad rep for not having great quality colostrum, but it's actually not true that they are a priori always worse quality. So I encourage producers to always check the quality of the colostrum and then make decisions based on what the quality looks like, because there's heifers that can make some awesome, awesome quality colostrum. So parity has an effect on that as well. Dry cow, length of the dry period has an effect on quality of colostrum. If you have the dry period being too short, and you probably observe this in cows that calf too early, have maybe a stillbirth, that colostrum usually looks a little bit more like milk than anything else, and they just haven't had the time to actually make it to concentrate it and produce what we want to see as this really thick gold. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And you can quickly dilute down good quality colostrum with having one milking of a cow that's really got bad quality colostrum. So before pooling, I would also suggest to test it so that you don't mix it all together and then you're like, oh, well, that pool is no longer, good and might not serve you with the 3 liters. So having that Brix refractometer around, which I'm sure you're using, is really helpful for that. I'm getting carried away. So
No.
Stop me now.
Carry on. Somebody stop me.
So based off today's presentation, should we all be shooting for a 68-day dry period?
That's an excellent question. So based on colostrum outcomes, yes. But there are other concerns, that weigh in. But I'm not saying that everybody should just go to a 68 or 75, or, the longer they're dry, the better, their colostrum will probably be. But it is something to just keep in mind, especially for those that struggle with colostrum. Quantity and quality, you just kind of check on the dry period length. As you know, cows don't calve when they're supposed to, right? So we have to count, the 10 or so days of standard deviation around our predicted calving. And if you're cutting the close-up period too short, you're probably not getting the benefit of that ration, and you're not getting the benefit of producing that colostrum. So don't quote me on saying everybody has to have a over 60-day dry period, but it's something to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah. I'd like to kick it over to Will. Will, you're out there meeting with a lot of customers and dairy farmers. What are some of the challenges that they're running into?
Well, one of the challenges related to that last topic, as far as the quality and factors that affect absorption, is bacteriologically. Are we doing everything we can to make sure that if we are pasteurizing, that we're starting with a good product? On my well-managed dairies, there's no reason that we can't get very low bacteria counts pre-pasteurization. There's definitely advantages for pasteurization as far as pathogen risk. That's definitely something that, if it's a concern for your farm, definitely something to look into. But as far as, going into that bacteriological quality, what can we do to control it, making sure that our maternity area is clean and sanitary, making sure that those udders are prepped very well, maybe even kind of do 2 prep sequences just to ensure that udder is as clean as possible, and also making sure that our harvesting equipment isn't being neglected. A lot of facilities have separate maternity areas or separate colostrum collection facilities. Making sure that those facilities and equipment is being maintained and sanitized, at least as well as the rest of the farm, is definitely something that can affect how that colostrum is harvested and how that calf absorbs it.
Yeah. Are you running into many of your dairies that have a lack of colostrum?
Generally, no. There is some seasonality to it. There's been some research looking at day length, and trying to adjust photo period and can we really move the needle? Not too much adoption in California, and it maybe isn't worth the expense most of the time. I think the timing of harvesting is really the most important. And if we do use that first lactation colostrum, if it's good quality, there's really no reason we can't use that.
Sabine, one other thing I kind of wanted to dig into while I was watching your presentation is that cow variability, and it seems to be pretty extreme and unpredictable, perhaps. And do we have any insights as to what's causing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I shared that there's a lot of variability in colostrum production between herds, but there's a lot of variability within a herd. And I would say that I'm not very good at predicting how much colostrum a cow makes from looking at her udder. Are you sometimes surprised? You think that there's a nice udder and then you can't barely get any colostrum out of there, and vice versa. So there are individual factors that have to do with things that we probably don't understand very well, such as the cow's endocrine status. So what are the hormones doing in that period just leading up to calving? But there are some factors that we do understand. And we know, for example, that cows carrying twins or carrying bull calves, that's a bigger total fetal weight, seem to make more colostrum. And so from that, we think that it has to do something with the placenta. There's bigger placenta, or 2 placentas if it's a twin calving, and that there's probably some contribution from that placenta in the stimulus, in the signaling to the cow. So that has something to do with it. But don't ask me what it is, because nobody really knows. But that is certainly one factor. And other factors that are individual for determining how much colostrum a cow makes is her own dry period length, for example, right? Is she calving early? Is she calving late? What other individual factors are there that I'm forgetting? Cows that have dystocia, any trouble calving, are typically not very good at producing colostrum. So there's probably some effect that they made colostrum in a dry period, but because of the dystocia, maybe they're not letting it down. It's a stressful event, so that's interfering with it. And in general, stressful events around the time of first colostrum harvest are going to be problematic in getting the colostrum out of the cow.
Yeah. Do you think there's a genetic component?
I definitely think there's a genetic component, and we talked about that today in the presentation. I think that now that we have such a better understanding of the genetics in our herd, now it takes people to measure the colostrum quantity and quality on these cows, and then I think we can actually make big strides in understanding how much of a genetic influence is there. So would encourage those who like genetics, which is not me, to get the hands on that data. And it's not difficult to collect, but you would be surprised how many people actually don't measure individual cow colostrum production and quality and document it so that we can do something with it. So I absolutely think there's a genetic component to it.
And what about milk production? Cows that are predisposed to be high producers, do they produce more colostrum or no, not so much?
Yeah, so interesting question. We summarized this in a recent review where we looked at all the factors that could be influencing colostrum production, and there's a nice big table in there that former grad student in my lab, Trent Westhoff, has put together, and there is some evidence that if a cow has high potential for milk production, that she could be making higher amounts of colostrum, but that is not true in all studies. We've seen it in one of our studies that cows that go on to make more milk in the first 70 days of lactation also had higher colostrum production, but there are certainly some studies that don't show that.
Balchem, we manufacture choline, world's largest manufacturer of choline chloride, and we have a product we sell into the ruminant space. And there's a ton of data that shows that we get 5 pounds of milk by feeding choline during the transition period, and 5 pounds is pretty standard. We did 3 studies where we actually measured colostrum, and in 2 of those studies we got 5 pounds of colostrum. The percentages was different because the starting point was different, and I'm just kind of curious if you've got, and you shared that data in your presentation, what's the hypothesis there in terms of why are we seeing that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Why are we seeing
I don't know. We need a scientist, another scientist here.
Who make the product,
yeah, we should. We should.
Really
Sorry.
should.
I'm just a marketing guy.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's good to have these studies, and I would encourage, going forward, to really look at colostrum as an outcome in these studies where we're manipulating something in transition periods, such as feeding choline, because in 2 other studies, there was no statistical significance. I shared that, but it's sometimes very hard in a small cow population to show statistical differences, although you might be seeing a biological effect. So we really need more studies to see if this biological effect holds true, which
we're doing now.
Which you're doing, good. And then we can synthesize those studies. And also what it gives us as an opportunity is to understand in which studies did it come out at the 5 pounds, and maybe in which studies it didn't necessarily. And that will hopefully give us some insight in why is it happening. And I know you're interested in discovering why that is. There's just a lot we don't know about the drivers of colostrogenesis. So I would give that question back to you. And
no, it's a fair pushback, right? And it's one that we need to address and will, right? It was even the first few studies where we decided to look at it was almost serendipitous. That okay, let's see what's going on with colostrum or calf growth and that kind of stuff. So and now it's part of our protocol. We're taking a look at the colostrum as we do research going forward. So
I would hypothesize it has to do with energy metabolism, perhaps.
Yeah.
But you'll educate us in
maybe
in due time.
Yeah. Any key topics that we've not covered yet on colostrum?
Well, I think the big disruptor has been the pasteurizers that have come available to us. I was skeptical of the value of pasteurization because we wanted to get colostrum into the calves immediately upon birth, and quickly learned that we can pasteurize and bank the colostrum, and actually that helped us because now we weren't waiting for that cow to freshen and get the calf delivered and processed and then get the cow milked out and get that colostrum to the calf very quickly. We had no control over the quality of that colostrum by doing that. We could get it in very quickly, but we had no control. Now with the pasteurization, we're able to measure the quality. We have 3 different kinds of calves born on our farm. About 40% of them are carrying embryos for the bull studs, So we don't own those calves. We birth them and process them and get them back where they belong.
What percent was that again?
About 40.
40. Wow.
And then we have our own replacements and just a small number of bull calves because of the embryos. But that's allowed us to steer the different colostrum qualities to the different categories of animals, whether it be a beef cross animal that's going to be sold as a young calf, or is going to be one of our future animals, or an animal going back to the bull studs. We have a large number of the calves that go back there. So the pasteurizers have given us much more control over what colostrum quality goes to what animal, into which category that might be, and how quickly it goes in. Now we don't have to go through all those other steps of getting through the maternity process, the calving process, and then harvesting later. We can be putting that colostrum into the pasteurizer while we're getting ready to deliver that calf. So by the time that calf comes out and it's clean and dry and dipped and ready, we've got warm colostrum of high quality, and that is kind of almost standardized the quality that we're able to deliver, and it's given us a much more steady result, steady control, because we have so many of the variables that used to just be up to Mother Nature are now within our control. So I think the pasteurizers have been the most disrupting and exciting technologies that's come along.
And to go off of this point, whether you're doing pasteurization and storage or you're storing in any other way, I think storage has given a lot of people this ability to actually be strategic about how they use colostrum, which colostrum they use, and then also plan ahead for these seasonal shortages that we're seeing all over, the country for sure, and then outside of the US as well, where you can plan ahead for the fall, winter period where colostrum supply will be a little bit lower with the surplus colostrum you might be getting in the spring and summer, and then labeling it with the quality, makes you then be able to strategically use it. And the pasteurizers are great. I want to come back to your point about the bacterial contamination. I absolutely agree. We have some farms that have squeaky clean colostrum and, very, very low bacterial numbers, much, much lower than the guidelines would suggest we should be under. And clarifying that most of the contamination does not come from the cow, but comes from the harvesting equipment, right? And I think that those farms that have this squeaky clean colostrum just do a fantastic job cleaning that equipment. Yes, clean maternity pen and cleaning the teats, preparing them well for milking, but really making sure that that equipment is as clean as any other milking equipment on the farm, or cleaner.
Kind of we're on the subject of pathogens. You talked a little bit about feeding mastitic colostrum. And so what are your thoughts? What did you share with the audience today?
Yeah, so one question that we get is if we have a cow calving with clinical mastitis, so we see, flakes in there and abnormal milk, should we be discarding this colostrum? And what I shared is that there's very little research on the quality and quantity in cows that calving with mastitis, but the little bit of research we have doesn't suggest that having mastitis greatly changes the colostrum of that cow. But the concern would be, we're not entirely sure what pathogen might be causing the mastitis, and so we might be more concerned from a disease transmission standpoint than from a colostrum quality standpoint to not feed that colostrum. And so that you can't know what's in there necessarily when you look at it, right? Pasteurization is a good way of taking care of that if you're worried about pathogens in the milk on the particular farm, and each herd would know their pathogen status. But having mastitis per se is not necessarily a reason to throw away all of the colostrum. Now, the data on how are we transmitting mastitis pathogens to calves and what would that do to them is very sparse. So I think we need probably more understanding of that as well. Similar to that, people ask, what about bloody colostrum? Can I feed bloody colostrum? And it's not necessarily poor quality, but the concern again would be potentially in that blood you can have some pathogens from that cow that might have a higher risk of transfer. Again, might be a reason for heat treating the colostrum and reducing that transmission risk.
I got a question for Will. Are you seeing many of your dairies that are using the beef on dairy? And the reason I ask is so we did a series of podcasts about a month ago where we talked to Tara Felix from Penn State, and she was talking about the fact that this phenomenon of these beef on dairy calves now are very valuable, and people are paying a lot better attention to them and giving them more colostrum, and now there's kind of a lack of colostrum out there. And so have you seen any of that going on with your clients?
Yeah, colostrum management has definitely become more of a concern because historically, bull Holstein calves didn't have a significant value as a day old versus these beef crosses, $800 to $1,000. So depending on the calf buyer, there's definitely premiums or deducts, mostly deducts as far as colostrum scores when those animals are received at the calf ranch or the raising facility. And some operations even offer discounts or premium charges on their daily yardage, depending on that individual calf's colostrum scores. So there's definitely more interest in it. But that's because the end person is demanding that from the producer.
Yeah. Is that putting more pressure on the volume that's available for your heifers?
Yeah, definitely. So more people are using the first lactation colostrum nowadays than even just a few years ago. It was very common that just went into the waste milk that's going to be used for rearing calves on farm or sold to a calf ranch, or sold to a colostrum manufacturer for supplementation purposes.
Another thing I've heard recently that's putting pressure on the colostrum volumes is it's being used in humans, and I don't know how big that is, but it's a thing that I hear in my podcasts that I listen to.
There's definitely more. My Facebook and LinkedIn feeds are filled with advertisements for colostrum supplements, and it's not just in people too. There's more research and more people using colostrum as therapy for calves, making their own transition milk using colostrum supplements or second or third milking colostrum. And then also calves that, if they do get scours, adding colostrum into those calves' rations as a therapy is becoming quite common nowadays.
Any things that we've left uncovered yet?
The people we put into the maternity teams.
Okay,
are,
absolutely.
A critical thing, and for some years we've made it an honored position for somebody to get to, so that they're selected. If we have somebody leave the maternity team, we have the maternity manager select from the milking crew who we think would be somebody who's reasonable and responsible and conscientious enough. So they're picked over by their peers to earn that position, and that has been very valuable for us. And then for a teaching tool with those people, we'll use the image of if they had taken their wife to the hospital to have a baby, how would they like that to be handled? So if they then, you look at their tools that they're using to deliver the calves, and there's placenta on them, they're kind of dirty and not well cleaned up. You said, no, if your wife went to the hospital, would you want this equipment to be used to deliver your baby? And they look sheepish, and they know that. So we're trying to instill that mentality that this is the equivalent of the human maternity care that we're trying to give to the animals, and set the standard. But I think the big thing is having the maternity manager pick the next person to work in there, instead of us really not knowing the guys and knowing who's more conscientious than the others. I think that's been a good tool for us.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the first comment you made about getting the people to understand the why and not just the protocol. And so, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you're putting maybe the best of the best there in the maternity. Yeah.
That's our intention.
Yeah, great.
And we talked about how you have to have patient people when you're bottle feeding calves for the very first time. And those of us who have done that know you have to be gentle and patient and detail-oriented and conscientious. And you have good success with that, right? Because you stress the importance of...
And I think it actually, the temperament of your animals, it impacts them from day one, how you treat them. We use a similar analogy. I love your analogy about that, by the way, the maternity. But we use a similar analogy for getting cows mixed up. How would you like to go home tonight and find strange people in your house?
That's a good point.
Yeah, and it's like, these poor cows, they get put in the wrong pen, and then they're all their friends, they get used to each other, and so yeah, it's an ongoing battle, especially with a rotary parlor, because I've pushed cows many a times, and what happens is you have the fast cows come in first, and the slow cows come in at the end, and then when you're pushing the slower ones back to the corral, the fast ones are right behind you, so it's complicated.
This has been a great conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's getting time where standing between you guys and maybe another cocktail, or still got yours there going, Sabine.
I wanted to mention one thing, and I think anybody that dairy farms so every morning, that's the first thing I do. I go to my maternity pen about 4:30 or 5, and it's kind of like Christmas Day every morning, really. You see,
What did you get?
especially if you have ETs and things being born, red calves. It's pretty cool to just see all the little presents you got overnight. And so I think when showing your employees how the care and having the right people there, it's really gratifying that that I have people that are willing to stay there all night and take care.
That's a good point.
Yeah, take that responsibility. So.
Interesting. You mentioned red calves. Do you know the Azels?
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in the same county with Mark Azel. Yeah. Now he's down in South America somewhere.
There's what's kind of interesting about the dairy business now is that we have the beef on dairy. We do the Wagyus now, and actually I love the fact that where the calves are going now, they're demanding that they be fed, because it's awesome for us who we're already raising our own calves. So we have another checks and balances, and I think it really helps our operation too, that we know that, if we have a problem, they probably have the problem, and then we can get right after it, because, but you have beef on dairy, you have the red, registered red stuff. It's kind of another game, and you got the polled thing, and so that's what keeps me going. It's not, don't get me wrong, we got to make a lot of milk every day, but just looking in the milk tank and seeing how much milk we got, probably I need a little bit more, and it's the cow side of the equation that keeps me going.
Yeah. Great comments. I think it's time to bring this to a close. What I'd like to do is go around the table and just kind of get a couple takeaways each of you would like to share with the audience. And if you don't mind, Joy, can I start with you? The economics of feeding Reassure precision release choline. Reassure is fed during the transition period, and because it's fed for such a short period of time, it costs just $15 per cow. And yet the benefits will continue to generate income throughout the year. Cows fed Reassure produce 5 pounds more colostrum, which pays for your Reassure investment on the very first day of lactation. Cows fed Reassure also produce 5 pounds more milk per day, every day. That means after the first day, every day is payday. Invest in Reassure during the transition period and recoup your investment on the very first day of lactation. After that, you got it, payday.
You want takeaways on colostrum?
I'd say just from this conversation.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you, my takeaway is I always enjoy sitting down with people from other states, and it reinforces how, even though we're 48 hours away, but we all kind of have the same concerns, and we have the same problems. And if we each wrote a book, you wouldn't know whether it was whose book it was, And so I think that's what makes our industry so great, though, is that we together can solve a lot of things together, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that is real cool. I generally don't give a couple takeaways for myself, but I got to tell you, I agree with you 100% that it's the people. It's not just a business for us, right? It's about the cows. It's about our kids. It's about the future. It's not just a business. So anyway, I love the comments, but thank you. Will, would you mind giving us a few comments, closing comments?
Yeah, one of the things that we didn't really talk too much about is monitoring outcomes. So like checking, either using RIDS or using serum total proteins to really monitor the outcome of our colostrum program, and maybe it can be an early indicator before we see those secondary issues as far as disease risk later in that calf rearing process. And it's in clinical practice, I'm more involved with the the something's a problem, like what can we do to fix it. So having that data available is definitely useful to see if there's a problem with a specific farm, and even on farm, if you're not doing it, it's monitoring colostrum. The results of the colostrum program are definitely nice, and you can give feedback to those maternity employees because they really do care, and a lot of times that feedback is helpful.
Great point. Don, you've been a great guest. Any final thoughts for us?
Yes, always. One thing we like to instill with our people is the question: if you were a cow, would you want to be on this farm? And you can ask that sometime if there's been a problem, maybe a down cow that wasn't properly handled, or protocol problems in the parlor. But just get that mindset that if you were on the cow side instead of the people side, would you be happy here? And that's a theme that we just try to keep coming back to.
Excellent comments. I appreciate that. Sabine?
I think I got really two takeaways. I think one is we stand on a lot of science that has been done over the decades regarding how to treat a calf on day one and how to make sure that they do well in our herds. And we know a lot of things, and we just have to put them in practice with people that care and that know why and that are motivated by how you explained, how you're motivating your workers, your team. But on the other hand, what also motivates me, who does clinical work and science, is that we have these conversations with producers, and they bring up questions, and we look at the literature and we're like, well, nobody really has looked at this yet. And that really is powerful, to have these questions come from producers to us, that we can actually address them and hopefully add something of value to what people can use on farm. Because it's fun to do science, but even for science geeks, it's no fun to do science that nobody can use, right? So I really always appreciate these conversations and bringing up maybe the knowledge gaps that we should be working on. So really enlightening conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been enjoyable. And Sabine, we love science geeks here at the Real Science
Somebody has to
Exchange.
be.
So yeah, no. So thank you for joining us. You did a great job with the webinar today. Maybe even better job with the podcast this evening. So thank you for that. I appreciate
Thanks
that.
for having me.
Joey, thanks for joining us.
Told you it was
pleasure.
going to be fun.
Yeah. Don, Will, thank you so much. You guys have been great guests. Appreciate you guys joining us. To our loyal audience, as always, thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something. Hope you had some fun. We hope to see you next time here at the Real Science Exchange, where it's always happy hour and you're always among friends.
We'd love to hear your comments or ideas for topics and guests. So please reach out via email to anh.marketing@balchem.com with any suggestions, and we'll work hard to add them to the schedule. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating on your way out. You can request your Real Science Exchange t-shirt in just a few easy steps. Just like or subscribe to the Real Science Exchange and send us a screenshot along with your address and t-shirt size to anh.marketing@balchem.com. Balchem's Real Science Lecture Series of webinars continues with ruminant-focused topics on the first Tuesday of every month, monogastric-focused topics on the second Tuesday of each month, and quarterly topics for the companion animal segment. Visit balchem.com/realscience to see the latest schedule and to register for upcoming webinars.